Welcome to Women's Sports Weekly, where women's sports happens every day, but we talk about it once a week. I'm Danielle.
And I'm Carolyn. Women's Sports Weekly is a podcast where we discuss the latest news, explore interesting stories, and share our love for women's sports. Follow us on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Women's Sports Weekly Pod. Follow us and rate us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Our sticker giveaway is happening. It is very simple. Follow us on Instagram at Women's Sports Weekly Pod. Follow us on Apple or Spotify Podcasts. Rate our show 5 stars and send us a DM of the rating, and we will send you a sticker while supplies last.
We've been talking about how we want to start taking pictures of our stickers on our different hikes, things like that. Wherever you are with them, it's not part of the giveaway, but we would love to see where they are in the world.
We saw one on a cooler this past weekend that was sent to us. So send us where in the world Women's Sports Weekly stickers are. We are officially in September now, which pretty much means it's fall.
Although it does not feel like that in Denver. It is still high 90s. I just feel like I'm constantly sweating.
Is it time to put out the fall decor?
Absolutely not.
Oh.
You know me, I love the fall. Part of me is holding on to summer this year because it went so fast. And part of me is like, it is over 90 degrees. How can I put anything fall out?
So when are you putting out the fall decorations?
Maybe talk to me in a week and I'll feel a little differently. But right now I can't even think about it.
Right now you're just hot and bothered.
I really am.
What is your favorite fall activity?
You know, I'm a sucker for anything that the city puts up, like a fall fest, or if there's something with pumpkins and cider, things like that. I just like to go experience things. I love a good jack-o'-lantern and things like that. So I don't know if I have necessarily a number one activity. I just really enjoy them all. What about you?
I can't believe you didn't say leaf peeping.
Oh, wow. Again, with this heat, I can't even think.
You can't even think about fall right now.
In Colorado, the aspens, they reach peak time in the fall before all the leaves fall off, and they turn bright yellow. It's so beautiful when the trees and the leaves turn bright yellow before they fall. We usually try to go on different hikes in the area to catch those.
And it's called leaf peeping.
Yes.
When you do it, which sounds very strange, but it's actually just a bunch of people from Denver getting into their cars and driving into the mountains to look at really pretty leaves. My favorite activity is definitely just wearing a sweatshirt with it being a little bit cooler. But we were talking about today how fall, unfortunately, these past couple of years has pretty much gone away, and it's just summer, and then it just gets cold. I feel like we're missing fall in Colorado, and I think it's happening in a lot of places, but it is hard when you go from really hot summer heat right into real cold and you feel like you don't get a fall.
Yeah, I'm definitely not ready for winter. I am ready for cooler temps, like that brisk fall morning I love, especially training for a marathon. As I get closer to race, I know the weather starts to change, and there's something about it that's nostalgic that I love.
Sweater weather is what I'm most looking forward to.
For sure.
Let's get into our highlight reel for this week. Danielle, start us off.
A ton of WNBA games have been going on. We were interested in seeing the Chicago Sky and Indiana Fever last Friday, and the Fever ended up winning 100-81. They were on fire.
It was a proper takedown.
In the beginning, Chicago Sky was up for a bit, and I was like, oh my gosh, was not expecting that. But then Indiana just turned it on and started to take over. They are very different teams this time around from the last time they played. We've talked about the rookies this year, the way they continue to progress, and just teams in general, the way that they're progressing, especially as we get closer to playoffs. It's really fun to see.
The Chicago Sky and Indiana Fever, the last time they met, they were more evenly matched. And since the Olympic break, the Chicago Sky have been struggling and the Indiana Fever have been doing really, really well.
Yeah, for sure. One of the biggest differences I noticed actually doesn't even have to do with the players on the court. But if you're a longtime listener, you know Carolyn historically has not been Caitlin Clark's biggest fan.
She has enough fans, so I thought I don't need to add to that. I can support other players.
But all of a sudden, Carolyn is Caitlin Clark's biggest fan. I'm noticing this during the game that you're all of a sudden cheering for her. You're upset at refs making calls against her. Earlier that day, you had told me she happened to be in a dream of yours.
It's not sexually explicit.
We don't need to say what the dream was about.
I have a couple comments. So one, the referees were bad, and that one male referee was real snarky. I don't know what was wrong with him. He was making some bad calls, and then he was rocking a tude. And Caitlin Clark stood up for herself, and she said, "You're being really rude. You don't have to speak to us like that," which I thought is really important, because even though a referee is in a position of power, you still need to treat people with respect no matter what. So I thought that was good. On top of that, yes, I did have a dream about Caitlin Clark this past week, and we were in high school and we were dating. And again, nothing sexually explicit. I've never viewed her in that way, and she was very nice to me. And really, that's all it takes for me to like you, is if you're just a little bit nice to me. So I woke up and I was like, I'm going to stop hating on Caitlin Clark today and just join the bandwagon and have some fun with it.
It was quite interesting. Usually I defend her when you go on your high horse about different things.
Let's not make it sound like I totally hate Caitlin Clark. I'm a Gamecock fan, and like I said before, she has enough fans, and I just am like, okay, but you know what? I've changed. I love Caitlin Clark.
I never said you hated her. I just said you weren't always your biggest fan. I laughed because even your sister, Allie, has texted you after an episode saying hashtag justice for Caitlin Clark. When we were watching the game last night, I even said to you, wow, Allie would be so proud. If you're listening, now you know Carolyn is Caitlin Clark's #1 fan.
Yep. So I'll be first in line, knocking out little kids to get her autograph.
But speaking of Caitlin Clark, she has been having a hell of a season, and she scored 31 points, which was a career high, and had 12 assists. That's quite the double-double there.
Her and Kelsey Mitchell, the way that they're working together, it's not something we saw at the beginning of the season. They're just starting to gel at this really good time. And maybe that's why I like Caitlin Clark, because I could see that they're trying to make a playoff run, and I want to get ahead of it and be like, see, I called it. I said it from the very beginning.
Kelsey Mitchell has been on fire. She was on fire in this game too. But Caitlin Clark has been breaking a ton of records this season. She recently broke the league's all-time record for most three-pointers by a rookie in a single season. On July 12th, just after 24 games in the WNBA, Caitlin Clark passed the milestone of 400 points, 100 rebounds, and 150 assists in a single season. No rookie in the league's history has ever achieved those stats.
She did it in just over half of the season. She was able to accomplish that.
She has so many more games to play, and she's already achieved that. Who only knows where she'll close out the season?
I think Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark, they're going to be the new record holders for everything for rookies going forward, and that's going to be the people to beat. And they're even taking over some WNBA records. It's really awesome to see these rookies come in and make such a huge impact.
Speaking of Angel Reese, she recorded her 23rd double-double of the season with 10 points and 11 rebounds. She broke 2 WNBA records previously held by Tina Charles. Her 23 double-doubles are the most by a rookie in a single season.
In that game against the Indiana Fever, she scored her 399th total rebound on the year, surpassing Tina Charles's record for the most rebounds in a season by a rookie. However, this past weekend, she added more rebounds and has moved into first place for the most rebounds in a single season in WNBA history.
Not rookie.
Yes. She got the rookie stat against the Indiana Fever, and then this past weekend in the other games, she got most rebounds in a single season. And the season's not over yet.
That's incredible. The two of them had a fiery college career, and everyone's been talking about them, and they continue to do well in the league.
The other thing that I want to mention is we are talking about how the Fever are doing really well and the Chicago Sky are struggling. Kennedy Carter didn't play in the game against the Indiana Fever. She is the top scorer for the Sky with over 17 points per game. She was out for health and safety reasons. We didn't get much more information on that, but not great timing as teams are working to clinch their playoff spot.
Speaking of playoffs, let's talk about current standings and playoff eligibility. As it stands at the date of recording, the standings are New York Liberty, followed by the Connecticut Sun, Minnesota Lynx, Las Vegas Aces, and Seattle Storm. All those teams have clinched a spot at this time for the playoffs. And then you still have some teams fighting for the remaining 3 spots. And in that battle right now, it's the Indiana Fever, Phoenix Mercury, Chicago Sky, Atlanta Dream, and the Dallas Wings. So it's going to be a tight end of the season to see who starts to clinch those final 3 spots.
Unfortunately, the LA Sparks and the Washington Mystics at this point, unless something really strange happens, it looks like they will not be in the playoffs.
Hopefully they can just continue to work on building their team at this point when looking at next year. With the playoffs, the WNBA playoffs seed teams based on regular season record, with the top team owning the number 1 seed. So at the end of the season, they'll look at overall record, and whatever team has the best record, they will automatically get number 1.
And it's only 8 teams out of 12 teams in the league currently.
Yes. The first round of the playoffs features the best of 3 format. The higher seed will host those first 2 games of the series. If they win those first 2 games, then that
clinch.
series is over. But I guess if they go into the third, then the lower seeded team will get a home game in that series.
Which I think is interesting. They don't go back and forth,
I know.
but I guess because they're only playing 3, they want to give home court advantage to the higher team. But once you get to game 3, then to have to go on the road, that would be very difficult.
It definitely throws a wrench into things.
But then when we get into the semifinals and the WNBA finals, both have a best of 5 format where the highest seed hosts games 1, 2, and 5.
And that's where you're going back and forth. It'll be interesting to see where we end up with playoffs. Teams are continuing to fight for those spots, so continue to watch. It should be exciting.
And you mentioned that you wanted to throw in a blooper reel for this week based on a conversation that happened in the WNBA when Lexi Hull, after one of the Indiana Fever games, was interviewed after she had a great game. I think you should read her quote when Kelsey Mitchell and Caitlin Clark were also sitting right next to her.
I think that we should incorporate this blooper reel moving forward because I love a good laugh. If you haven't seen the video, check out Instagram. I think it's on ESPNW. But Lexi Hull quoted, "I was just trying to get my hands on as many balls as I could." Right after she said that, Caitlin Clark looked down and started giggling, and then Kelsey Mitchell started giggling, and Lexi Hull literally was like, "Caitlin?"
And her
she
face
started giggling.
Was so red. So red. And I can so relate to that. I have some friends from college, Kayla, Audrey, and Candace, and when we get together, we turn into little children. I love a good penis joke, obviously.
Yeah, and you know this would be something that Erica would just get me laughing at as well.
And we have to remember, we're in our 30s and we still laugh at really ridiculous jokes. These women are in their 20s and they're having a good time. And sometimes you say things. Sports really has so many crossovers. The words that we use in sports can easily take on a sexual connotation in a split second, and it was really funny.
Lexi Hull's been playing really well, which I love. I love when she was on Stanford. Always a big fan of Lexi Hull, so I'm just been really happy to see her. But that was our blooper of the week. Moving on, we watched an upsetting match, I will say, because you love Coco Gauff in the U.S. Open. Unfortunately, we saw her lose. At least in my head, she lost to another American, Emma Navarro, who was playing out of her mind. So let's dive into that matchup.
We're talking U.S. Open. We're talking tennis. This is Coco Gauff, who was ranked number 3, versus Emma Navarro, who was ranked number 13 in the world. If you are having deja vu, you're right, because we have talked about this exact matchup before. They previously played each other at Wimbledon, where Emma Navarro beat Coco Gauff in 2 sets. This was a rematch. This rematch was interesting to me because Wimbledon's played on grass and U.S. Open is played on a regular court. And I thought that was going to really benefit Coco Gauff because she can really hit the ball. She moves around so well. However, Coco Gauff was serving the ball and Emma Navarro was hitting back so hard. She was getting to every ball and she was playing amazing defense, where it was getting really frustrating for Coco Gauff because as the server, you usually have the advantage, and Emma Navarro was totally taking away that advantage and making every point when Coco Gauff was serving so difficult.
One of the other things that we kept noticing while watching is we talk about individual sports a lot And we've talked about how mental it could be. Speaking of Coco Gauff serving, she was really struggling just to get the ball over the net in some cases. I have gotten into tennis because of you, and it's not something I ever grew up watching. The more I watch, the more I enjoy it, and I'm getting to know people. And I personally have never seen Coco Gauff do that so much. I just felt like all these double faults, you can tell she was getting in her own head, which was unfortunate because, like you said, when she did serve the ball well, yes, Emma was making great plays, but there's only so many great plays you can make. And how many times did Coco just lose points by double faulting on the serve?
Emma Navarro took the first set. She won 6-3. We get into the second set and Emma Navarro breaks Coco early. Do you know what a break is? Now that you tell me what a break is.
So you said Emma broke Coco, which means Coco was the one serving.
Yeah.
Typically, when you serve, you have the advantage and should win that game, but Emma won that game.
Yes, and that's called a break. Oh my gosh, I have a tennis bay. Wow. So Emma broke Coco early in that second set, and so they get into the next game, and Emma's serving. And I looked at you and I said, Coco needs to win this game if she wants to have any chance of winning this match. So she actually won that game. And that was a turning point where I was like, I think Coco can do this. Coco Gauff ended up winning the second set 6-4. So we get into this third set and I'm like, okay, momentum's going Coco Gauff's way. And then as you said, the double faults came and Coco was not playing a great game from the very beginning. But the third set, she fell apart. In the third set, Emma Navarro broke Coco again early. Coco fell apart. She had 11 double faults in the third set alone. So I could say that Emma Navarro broke Coco, but in that third set, Coco was breaking herself. And I want to give all credit to Emma Navarro.
She played unreal.
A hell of a match and really did the most work and should have won. And not just because Coco wasn't playing well, but Coco really, really struggled. And in a way where in the last US Open, when Coco Gauff won the entire US Open, Coco was playing a lot more free. And I don't think she had as much pressure as she has now this year, now that she's risen up so high in the world rankings. And so I think there's some work that needs to be done on that side of how to handle that pressure that has been with her the entire year. And this is towards the end of the tennis season. And how do you stay focused when things go wrong? How do you make sure that you can bounce back, which is so incredibly difficult to do, I think, for any person, for any athlete. But Emma Navarro takes it and she's moving on in the US Open.
It's definitely double-sided to your point, because there were some great rallies where Coco and Emma were going back and forth, and Coco would make this great play and somehow Emma would get to it and manage to hit it back and keep the ball in. That also wears an athlete down. So I'm sure she'll look at film, Coco, and just look at outside of the serving, where could have she bounced back or responded a little differently, and you just have to come back next time. But congrats to Emma Navarro, because at the end of the day, she's also an American, and now we'll be rooting for her, but it does suck to see Coco lose this early on.
We've been watching it nonstop. We've been watching men's and women's. It is such a good event. If you're not watching it, if you haven't given tennis a try, I just encourage you to at least give it a try, because you're not going to regret it. And there's so many momentum shifts and there's so much passion in it. I just really love tennis.
Yeah. And not only try watching, try playing, and you'll have a lot more empathy for what these players are going through.
I know,
as well.
we're talking about her double faults and I'm like, I remember when I double faulted and I remember when I had a mental breakdown, and that was not these high stakes at all.
Yeah. But excited to continue to watch that. And for today's deep dive, we have to talk about the Paralympics, because that is ongoing throughout these few weeks. And for anyone that was upset when the Olympics were over, now you have the Paralympics. We thought it would be fun to get into the history of the Paralympics. So why don't we dive into it?
Let's do it. History of the Paralympics. After World War II, sports for athletes with disabilities was more widely introduced because there was a large number of war veterans that were coming back after wartime and they were injured. In 1944, a spinal injury center at the Stoke Mandeville Hospital in Great Britain was created, and in time they started to put in more rehabilitation sport, and that sport evolved into recreational sport, and then that sport evolved into competitive sports. So the Stoke Mandeville Games later became the Paralympic Games, which first took place in Rome, Italy in 1960. So started laying the framework in 1944, and then in 1960 it featured 400 athletes from 23 countries. Since then, it's taken place every 4 years.
I think it's awesome they started that long ago. Yes, it was in the 1900s, but when you think about 1944, that this kind of idea started to come to fruition, I think that's really cool.
For sure. Also, I'm going off on a tangent, but did you ever see those videos when you said 1900? It sparked it. Have you ever seen those videos of the social media team asking players, what year do you need to be born in to be old? And so many of the players say any time in the 1900s, which makes me feel so incredibly old, because I think 1900 and 1991 are very, very far apart. But for people born in 2000 who are now 24, they are... yeah, they think we're oldies.
So they think if you're 30-year-old,
you're old.
Scary.
So scary.
I have not, but I don't want to see them because that would just be depressing, honestly.
All right, back to the Paralympics. In 1976, 16 years later, the first Winter Games in Paralympics were held in Sweden, and they have continued every 4 years on since then. This year, in 2024, 4,400 athletes are taking part in the Paris 2024 Paralympic Games. In the Olympics that happened 2 weeks ago, there were 10,500 athletes who participated. Quite a lower number. However, the number of Paralympic events is 549, while the Olympic events is only 329. There's a reason for it. This is due to the Paralympic classification system, which groups athletes who have similar physical, visual, or cognitive abilities. For swimming, for example, they have 14 different categories multiplied by the number of traditional categories.
That 14 goes into that total number. So it's technically all swimming, but that's why it's so many more.
Yes, because they separate it. If you have a visual impairment, they'll do everyone who has a visual impairment together.
Got it.
If you have a lower leg amputee, they do all of them together, but for all of the swimming events. So 50 meter, 100 meter, backstroke, all of those. So that's why there's so many more events in the Paralympics. And this year, 1,983 women are competing, which is 45% of the total competitors and is a record-breaking amount of women competing in the Paralympics.
That's incredible.
I want to talk about a few of the athletes that I think we should know. I want to also preface this by saying that if you look up any athlete in the Paralympics, they all have a story. They've all had to overcome incredible obstacles to get to where they are, but let's highlight just a few. Sarah Adams from the USA, she plays wheelchair rugby. Wheelchair rugby is also called murder ball.
Interesting. Scary.
It is scary, which I think just points to how physical this game is.
Yeah.
And she became the first ever woman to, one, win a gold medal with USA Wheelchair Rugby during the Pan American Games in 2023. And she appeared in this Paris Paralympics, and she is the first American woman to ever compete in wheelchair rugby at the Paralympics. She's a total badass.
That's awesome.
Another athlete, her name is Tracy Otto. She is also from the USA. She competes in archery. Her story is really crazy, and it involves domestic violence. So if you prefer not to listen to this part, you can just skip on ahead. Her and her current boyfriend were attacked by her ex-boyfriend when she was 23 years old. She was with her current boyfriend at the time. The ex-boyfriend broke into her place and attacked them in the middle of the night.
I remember you telling me about this. It's really awful.
During that attack, Tracy Otto lost her left eye and was paralyzed from the chest down, and her boyfriend, who was with her, suffered a punctured lung. Close to 5 years later, they are still together.
Wow. That's
and
great.
After her accident, she felt like she had some additional time on her hands. She didn't really know what to do with it. She was living in Tampa, and she just Googled on her phone adaptive sports programs in my area. And archery came up. She found a center in Tampa. She went, and she said she took her first shot and was like, I'm in. Whatever I need to do to continue to keep doing this is what I want to do. And she found her way to the Paralympics, which is really, really cool. She has won gold for the USA at the 2023 Pan American Games, and she is competing in this Paralympics in Paris as both an individual and with a team.
I love that she was able to look that up, and the fact that things are available to these athletes.
Yes.
And now she's an Olympian. Good for her, because I can't imagine the road to recovery that she went through. And all these athletes have stories, and I appreciate learning about their stories.
Yeah. And then the final athlete that I want to mention is Zakia Kudadati. She plays for the refugee team In para taekwondo, she made history last Thursday by winning the refugee team's first medal at a Paralympic Games. She took home the bronze, and she is originally from Afghanistan. She actually represented Afghanistan in 2021 at the Paralympics, but even to compete at the 2021 Paralympics, she had to be secretly evacuated after the country faced the Taliban takeover. She began practicing taekwondo in secret at age 11 in a hidden gym in her hometown, and now she lives in France where she's able to compete for this refugee team. She dedicated the medal to all the women in Afghanistan, and again, just a story where you're like, how do these people continue to bounce back and then come out here and win? It's really incredible.
For sure. And if you're wondering if you can watch these incredible athletes, the answer is yes. I wanted to chat through the evolution of the TV coverage of the Paralympics because it started off not great, but we are making good headway at this time. It is something that is widely covered. So you had mentioned in 1960 was the first Paralympic Games in Rome, and there was minimal media coverage for that Paralympics. When it first started, not much going on from a media perspective. And then 16 years later, 1976 in Toronto, this became the first televised Paralympics, 16 years after the first one, but it was limited to just the highlights. While it says televised, it wasn't truly televised.
Sure.
They were just going through highlights of those games. As we get into later 1900s,
The late 1900s, when we were born.
AKA the year I was born, 1992, when the Paralympics was held in Barcelona, that's when things started to increase in terms of media attention, and there were even some TV broadcasts. So you know what? 1992 was a great year. And then fast forward to the year 2000 when it was in Sydney, there was even more coverage and started to gain more of a global reach. While it didn't happen year over year, you can see every so often they started to increase this coverage. And then in 2012 in London, this was a huge milestone for the Paralympics with extensive BBC coverage and digital platforms. So as you can see, we're gaining traction there. I'll skip over a few more years, but looking at 2024 now, this is the most media coverage that the Paralympics have ever received. They are covering 1,000 hours of the games. Basically, what we saw with the Olympics, it's very similar coverage with the Paralympics, which is well-deserved, and I'm just really happy to see it. We had tennis on earlier, wheelchair tennis. It's incredible the challenges these people face on a day-to-day, and now they're putting themselves out there on a global stage, and they're finally getting the recognition that they deserve.
We need to be really mindful of language when we're speaking about this. There was this whole kind of movement of these athletes are not participating in the Paralympics. They are here to win, and they are competing in the Paralympics. And so as far as we've come in media attention, I do think that there's opportunity for even more growth and opportunity to make sure that we're speaking about these athletes in a way that honors them as athletes and not just honors them for the disability that they have. So yes, they have overcome things like we've said, and also they are athletes who want to compete and win, and we should be giving them that respect.
Definitely. This year in Paris, it is the first time in history where the entire world has the opportunity to watch the games. According to the IPC, which similar to the IOC, it's the International Paralympic Committee. Leading up to this event, they're expecting record audiences.
We're already seeing that.
Yes.
In the track and field events, they're filling that 75,000 person stadium.
And I also think that with this extensive media coverage, stereotypes and misconceptions about disability is going to start to change because people are actually getting the chance to see these people compete. And even just today, I learned so much. It does break down some of those stereotypes.
I think it's also important to point out every person knows someone with a disability, whether they can see it or not. And at some point in your life, if you're lucky enough to live long enough, you're probably going to experience a disability, whether it's hearing loss or loss of vision. I think it's really inspiring to see athletes continue to compete when it might not be me now, but it's going to be me in the future. And what am I going to do with my life when things get a little bit more difficult? I feel like there might be this thought that people with disabilities are far away from us, and they're really not. They're so close to home. If we're lucky, we're probably going to have a disability one day.
Another thing to note is we've talked about how important representation is in the past as it relates to other things, but this matters for young children growing up with disabilities. They might not realize the doors that are open to them, and now you have all this coverage that they can see these athletes athletes on the stage and they can see themselves in those athletes and feel like they have more of a chance or just more openings for them. And I think that's so important as well.
There could be another Tracy Otto out there, right? Who's at home and something tragic happened to them and not knowing what to do with their life. And then they see someone like her out there continuing to take advantage of their life and competing on a worldwide stage. And I'm sure that has to be super inspiring. It's inspiring to me.
How do you think the trend towards more inclusive sports coverage might continue?
I think we get into this discussion a little bit, and I'll even relate it back to women's sports. For so long, it was this idea that no one was interested in women's sports. And what we're really finding out is that people are. It's just whether you broadcast it or not. And so we've broadcasted the Olympics. Everyone gets super into the women's soccer team during the Olympics, the gymnastics team, and then it was falling off for a bit. But now with this increased push for media rights, you put it on, people are going to watch. And I think we're going to see that with the Paralympics this year, that if you put it on, people are going to watch. Let's not fall into the easy answer that no one watches. And let's actually say, are we putting the money and time into it, and see what results come out? And I think the more money, the more time that goes in, people are going to want to watch, and people are going to love to hear these stories. And I think that's what the Olympics does so well, is they cover the stories of these humans who are competing. And I think if there's more opportunity to do that, it could totally expand and become more inclusive. And we might even see more sports. If we have WNBA finals, if we have NBA finals, can we also link it up with our wheelchair basketball finals? That would be really cool to see.
I'll be curious to see how it trends.
Do you have any thoughts on that?
I agree with you. The easy thing to say is no one watches, and it's just not true. And if you broadcast it, you're going to see the numbers, and the data speaks for itself. So I'll be curious to see what happens with that data, if anything. But a lot going on with the Paralympics. So if you have time and you're at your TV, put it on.
We know you have time.
Watch it, learn a few things. It is a lot of fun to watch. Let's talk about what we're looking forward to this week.
Well, I'm still on my US Open tear. So the quarterfinals for the US Open in tennis take place today when we release, September 3rd. The semifinals will be on Thursday, September 5th. And then the finals for the US Open will be Saturday, September 7th. So I will be watching all of those matches to see how far Emma Navarro can go. And Jess Pagul is still in as well, who also represents the United States. So I'll be rooting for all the US folks.
Me too. Excited for more tennis. And for me, I am looking forward to the Las Vegas Aces versus New York Liberty game Sunday, September 8th at 4 p.m. Eastern.
This will be interesting. They've both clinched spots in the playoffs. The Aces have been playing a little up and down lately. So this is going to be a good matchup and a good preview for the playoffs. That's it for this week. We will see you next week on Women's Sports Weekly. In the meantime, watch women's sports, watch the Paralympics, rate and subscribe to the pod on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. Share the podcast with your friends, and keep sending us topics you want us to cover on Instagram at Women's Sports Weekly Pod. Thanks for joining us.